This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. Welcome to fall. Well, here in the Northern Hemisphere at least, it's perhaps a different season for you in the Southern Hemisphere, but as for us, we're just starting to have some cooler weather finally come through, and that is much appreciated, along with a little bit of rain and everything, so it'll provide for a little bit easier travel weather, perhaps, rather than being hot and sultry, or freezing cold, at least later in the winter, but enjoying it while we can then right now. Well, this is going to be a long podcast, so I've got a lot of information to give you, and if you subscribe to the pod letter, you will find out more information, including about a new travel opportunity that we have for next year that's going to be a special thing with the Magic Word Podcast sponsoring Abraca Travel. We're going to be going to Budapest for the 100th anniversary of Houdini's death, and Budapest, of course, was where he was born, and we have some more details on that. You can find that out in the pod letter if you'll just read that, and if you have any more questions, you can then send me an email. That's scott@themagicwordpodcast.com. But also, we have had a contest running for the past month. We've just completed the final week of that, and this week's final winner of Steve Friedberg's copy of his book called Castle Notes, and the winner is Andy Oakden. Congratulations, Andy, and thank you for entering the contest. There are a lot of other people who had entered the contest but didn't win, but if you want to have a chance to get a copy of that, if you would just send an email to Steve Friedberg at wow@stevefriedbergmagic.com, he will help you out. But here's a little bit more. I had an opportunity to chat with Steve about the book, so you know exactly what is in it. We just finished a contest this past month with an opportunity to win a copy of the Castle Notes from Steve Friedberg. And for those of you who didn't know what the book was about, I thought it'd be best if we talk to the professor here right now. So let's talk with Steve Friedberg and find out a little bit about what the Castle Notes book is all about. Tell me, hey there, Steve, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Scott. The book is about 72 pages long. Aside from that, there's a dozen effects in the book. And the whole focus is of the effects themselves are effects and tricks that you can do. I know that we've all been to lectures from really fantastic magicians, and afterwards, many of us leave those lectures going, what I've seen was incredible. I can't do any of that. My purpose in putting this book together was to put together a series of effects that people can do. But aside from that, taking it one step further, it's not only the effects that are in the book, it's also some thinking about what you do, why you do it, and for whom you do it. If all we're doing is just trick after trick after trick, it just doesn't matter. It has to be a focus on for whom are we performing, what is the desired effect, not only from the trick itself, but how do we want to make these people feel after having seen what we do?
And that's a good point. There are enough books out there, I think, of tricks. And so I think we should have one that tells us about how better to focus on our audience and what it is that we can do to impact them and create a memorable experience.
Absolutely. And even the words that we use are absolutely incredible from the very first time that you engage somebody. I mean, I'll go up to a group of people if I'm doing a strolling gig at a corporate event, and I'll say, good evening, my name's Steve, I'm your magician for the evening, and with your permission, I'd like to share a couple of things with you. Now, those words are specifically chosen because, number one, it identifies who I am and what I'm doing there. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, with your permission, I'm not going to foist myself on them. I'm not going to be one of those people, I'm the great Steve, and bow down before me as I do these whatever. So with your permission, I'd like to share a couple of things with you. And that goes back to my theory that what I try to deliver is what I refer to as the magical moments of wow. That you see this stuff, it's happening right in front of you, and you go, oh, wow. So
Right.
if I can share that moment with you, then it's good for everybody. It's good for you. It's good for me.
And it sounds like a great book. And so there are, again, how many tricks? About a dozen tricks or so that are in it?
About a dozen effects in there. They're almost all card based. That doesn't mean that I only do cards. I do some stuff as well. But cards, I carry them with me wherever I go. I have those on my belt. I have my rubber bands, and I'm ready to go.
And so these are tricks also called the Castle Notes because of your performance at the Magic Castle.
Well, I actually had the honor of headlining, of being a featured performer at the castle 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And as I say, it's an honor. And I actually lectured once at the Magic Castle. And these notes were the basis for what I did there. Now, I've actually added to them over time, as well as putting in the thoughts about what I do and why I do it, as well as the really bad puns that are at the back of the book. I mean, they're awful puns, and I make no apology for it.
Well, you're so good at those too.
Well, thank you, I think.
And so those who did not get a chance to enter into the contest and missed out on that opportunity, we again gave one away throughout the month of September, and we're going to be starting a new contest in the month of October. But for those who still might be interested in getting a copy of them, do you have a website, or they contact you directly, or?
Well, they can. My website is www.stevefriedbergmagic.com. Alternately, they can hit me up on email at wow, as in moments of wow, at stevefriedbergmagic.com. I'm also available on Facebook, Instagram, all the usual suspects.
And that's Friedberg, Friedberg.
Right.
Okay. Steve, thank you again very much for offering this the way that you have. And these are available also in PDF form, so that way you don't have to pay foreign shipping that way.
Absolutely.
So thanks again. I appreciate you making that offer. And I know those who were winners are enjoying them. And if you didn't, I think you need to go and check out the website and order your copy direct. Thanks again, Steve.
My pleasure. Stay well.
Now that contest is over, we're going to be starting a new contest, which I think all of you will be interested in. As we get into this month of Boo soon, in the month of October, we'll be featuring a lot of people who are perhaps a little bit on the macabre or the bizarre side, as well as on the people who are experts on Houdini and perhaps have interest in Houdini. So we will be talking about them then too. And that leads me to the person that I just got to talk to, who is going to be sponsoring the next contest for this coming month. I'm so excited that throughout the month of October that we're going to be offering a contest where we will have a prize each week of the month of October that is the Houdini Legacy deck that was designed by, produced, and made by the artist and past national president of the Society of American Magicians, who I've got with me right now, John Midgley. Hi, John.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
I want to find out a little bit more about these cards. I mean, there have been a lot of other Houdini cards. What differentiates these from others, and why did you decide to design these and make this deck?
So it was it started by accident. I did an illustration of Houdini. I like to doodle, and so I made a drawing. And somebody had made a comment, and I did a mock-up kind of back design, and people were interested in it. And then a friend of mine in Louisville, Brett Soule, said, if you had original court cards, I think you have something there. And so that sparked it, and I started illustrating all of the court cards, important figures of people in Houdini's life. I talked to a lot of people who know a lot more about Houdini than I did, so that I could learn even more. And then each suit is even designed for like different eras of Houdini's career. I've never seen a Houdini deck that did that. So we separate that. All the aces also represent different types or staples in his career, whether it's the first person to fly in Australia, fly a plane in Australia, or having a whole film production company. So there's also some effects I haven't actually shared with it, but I'll be adding it to the website. Some effects built into the deck telling the story of Houdini, especially the seance, his passing, and the message that he left for Bess to prove if he could come back, within the 10 years after his passing, that he would deliver a message. And so one of the cool things that's designed in the box is if you heat up your card box underneath the flaps and you unstick the glue, those same two messages are underneath the flap. So there's all this kind of creative stuff that's built in. The other thing I really like about it, and I need to thank profusely over and over again, is Sean Farquhar. He worked a long time to design and find the secret recipe for these beautiful deck of playing cards. So if you've ever gotten a deck from him, these cards shuffle just beautifully. They're cut a couple times. You could faro every which way. And so thanks to Sean, not only these cards look cool, but they handle amazingly.
And also, they are in limited supply. Isn't that right?
So there's 2025, the year that we did this project. And yeah, every deck has a sticker on it. It's a unique sticker and it's numbered. So every deck is numbered for, 1 out of 2025.
I almost hate to open the deck and play with it, but I know that it's going to feel like butter. I know that Sean is a perfectionist, and I've played with those cards of his from his House of Wonders that are wonderful. So, yeah, I can only imagine these will be great, too.
That same thing, that quality. And so I've been faro shuffling this deck since I got it. And I set it aside and come back and they still faro just perfectly. And so I just love these cards.
Now, in designing the cards, and the reason that you did this was because of a special project and where the funds are going to be going.
Yeah, absolutely. So been top of mind for many years. Houdini's gravesite is almost 100 years old. It has structural damage. It's a big monument to this guy, and there's cracks and foundational issues. And so it requires a lot of repair. And then some vandalism, people mess around. There's jewels of the SAM logo. People pop those things off, and we'd really like to bring it back to its glory days. So Dorothy Dietrich and Hank Feinberg, they'd been working quite a while to try to raise funds. And you'll notice on the bottom of the box, too, it even lists these are combined efforts. So the Society of American Magicians has a fund that raises money to restore his gravesite, and that's working with Dorothy and her team there at the Houdini Museum in PA. And so all the funds, once I get back the money I put into it, mm-hmm. and we're no longer in the red, those funds will go directly to the Houdini gravesite restoration. In fact, if you're near the Houdini Museum, you can travel right there. I sent Dorothy, well over 100 decks, so that people can start purchasing things directly from her too.
And she's in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Right. And also, if people want to order them directly rather than hoping and crossing their fingers of getting a deck for free through this contest we're going to be having, where can they go? What's the website?
HoudiniCards.com. And there's still, I think, 4 uncut sheets left, too. So if somebody wants wall art, we got 4 of those bad boys left.
And that sounds pretty cool. I love an uncut sheet. That does make such a nice frame poster for your wall. And this is a particularly lovely set. And you have red and blue back decks. So when someone...
So actually, not quite yet. It's just red. But it does the 56th card. So there's 56 cards in the deck. And one of the cards is a red and blue back. With the plan that maybe in a year releasing not a limited edition, but just a standard blue deck of those cards.
Okay, so for now, the winner will be receiving a red-backed card, deck of cards.
Got the red ones.
That sounds great. John, thank you very much for what you have done, not only with this, but also by spreading this around the world, by being the president of the Society of American Magicians. A good job that you had done in spreading good welfare and everything with the organization, and also just the artwork that you do. And you do great work, and you're really... an important person, I think, in the world of magic here. And so thank you again for doing everything.
I'm taking that snippet out of that audio. I'm going to play it on the loop. Yeah, I do want to thank Matthew Crabtree, too. He came up with a great idea, and it's on every pip in the deck. So that's the current president of the SAM. Every pip is a key. And the teeth of the keys are all HH for Harry Houdini. So I just wanted to thank current most illustrious for that tidbit.
Yes. Yeah. Well, John, again, thank you very much. And I would recommend if everybody would just go to themagicwordpodcast.com for an opportunity to win these cards. And I will say, if you're listening to this in future months or years after the contest is gone, you can go to that website at houdinicards.com. And if they have some left, you will be lucky. And maybe by next year again, you might be getting a blue deck instead of the red deck that they have then right now. But again, John, thanks very much. And I appreciate all that you do.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
I want to give a special shout out of appreciation for my friends Steve Friedberg and to John Midgley for offering these wonderful prizes to the listeners. So I hope that you guys appreciate what we're doing for you then as well by helping to support them. Well, I want to get on with this week's podcast because we have a lot to discuss here with Wayne Allen. When I was at Magic Live in Las Vegas earlier this year, we had a chance to sit down. I've been wanting to talk with him for a while. There have been many people who had come to me saying, you need to talk to this guy. He has so much knowledge. He has been everywhere, done everything over the years, and he is also about my age. So it was something that I know he has had a long history of success as a professional magician, doing trade shows as an illusionist. Back in 1982, won a gold medal at F.I.S.M, actually. And he has consulted for David Copperfield and as well as Criss and performed for many of the presidents and worked in the White House and has got his own theater now in Southern Virginia. He's going to talk all about that. Also is good friends with Doug Henning. Yeah. Anyhow, what a guy, and he's got a lot to share, so I'm going to step out of the way. So please welcome my guest this week, Mr. Wayne Allen, here on The Magic Word. We have recently returned from F.I.S.M. By the time that you are hearing this, it is a distant memory. But also the fact that this gentleman is a past winner of F.I.S.M. is also a distant memory because it was in the distant past when that happened, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But bringing him up to date, he's been just a very avid trade show magician, good friends with Bud Dietrich and many others who were back in the day of doing all the trade shows. We'll talk a little bit about that, about the history of trade shows. I hope we kind of get into that. And then he has his own theater then right now, it's called the Historic, what?
North Theater in Danville, Virginia.
There you go. Thank you very much. That was the voice of, and my friend you're going to be hearing a lot from then right now. Please welcome Wayne Allen. Hey, Wayne.
Thanks, Scott.
I'm so glad that you're here with me.
What a pleasure. Thank you so much.
I want to ask you about the F.I.S.M. Was that kind of a surprise? Because back then, F.I.S.M. was just another convention. You just have to be at the right place at the right time, I guess. Or how'd that work out? Or did you?
Actually, I'll tell you, I always felt when I got in the business, I turned professional in 1972. I was just 5 years old.
Yeah.
But, don't I wish, right?
Huh.
But, no, F.I.S.M. was the biggest convention, but most Americans didn't go to
know about it. That's true.
Or know that much about it. But I actually, a lot of people don't know, I was fortunate to win in 82, but I actually competed twice before then. I competed in 1973 in Paris, and I went on and was part of the Emile Lowe Magic Carpet Tour of 40 magicians and their wives or friends or whatever on that trip. And Bud Dietrich was one of them. I had just met Bud recently at a lecture at Al's Magic, and we had already developed a good friendship. So in Paris, we did some more, and he's the guy that got me into trade shows. But anyway, in Paris, I competed in the magician Dick Ray, who was a wonderful professional school show magician. He was my mentor as a young man, and unfortunately he became ill the year before F.I.S.M. and he had to retire, so he sold me his business. It was 120 schools. We had an exclusive arrangement with the Board of Education in that particular county outside D.C., PG County. Anyway, so we're at F.I.S.M., and I'm performing an act which was called Jeweled Fantasy. And it was a unique act, had a lot of Del Rey influence in it, with no electronics, but the kinds of animation and everything. Mm-hmm. But my friend Dick Gray, I performed it for him before I went, and he was always very blunt with me. And he says, Wayne, it's a good, clever act, he says, but you don't have a chance of winning. But, I said, I'm going to go for it anyway. I've always had this desire to go for to shoot for the moon, and if I miss, I always feel I'm going to fall among the stars, which is a famous quote. So I go, I don't win, but because I'm on this trip with all these, mostly hobbyist magicians, Ed Michel, who was the wonderful illustrator. Well, Ed was an attorney. John Macker, who was an attorney from Louisiana outside of New Orleans, who would later become IBM president. John's on the trip. So when the television people that are asking to everybody to sign rights over for the show, they come and they were paying like $25. And for somebody like Bud Dietrich, they were paying like $300 or $400 because he was, famous magician name. So they told me, $25, don't sign it, and don't do it. So I don't. A year later, my grandmother calls from Pennsylvania, and she says, Wayne, I just saw you on the Bill Bixby Wonderful World of Magic. I'm like, oh, yeah? So I called my attorney. My attorney calls 4-Star Productions in Hollywood, and they check and they say, yeah, we don't have rights to have him on there, but we've shown it in Israel. What can we do about this? So I said, well, how much did you pay the highest paid performer? And they said, we paid $1,850 to Shimada. So I said, I'll take that. And I got it. So it paid for the whole trip. It was my first time on national television. Then I tried again in '76 with a very unique new levitation.
You were competing in stage then, not parlor?
Yes, and I was both General Magic at this
General
point.
Magic,
And so then that show, the European Magic magazines, frankly said, because it was very, very political then, very biased against Americans. And but the European magazines said that I should have gotten third, which was probably true. Hans Moretti. Hans told me. He said, man, you got screwed. But anyway, whatever. But I said, that's okay. So
I can relate.
Yeah, right. Yes, I know. And I feel for you, my friend, on that. But so your time will come too, as it did with me. I didn't win. The next 3 years, I didn't do it. But anyway, then I came up with a good idea, I thought. And I said, you know what? I think I have a really shot. So in '82, we did fortunately win. That was the year that Lance won the Grand Prix. So we were the two Americans that, so we kind of broke, well, certainly he did it with the Grand Prix. Right. And me also, because I was the first American to ever win Grand Illusion. But I'll tell you a great story about that, too, is that I had met Walter Zaney Blaney, who was such a wonderful guy, great performer. I'd met him at a trade show that we were both working at in the mid-'70s. And, I'm a young coming up guy, and he's established.
Right.
But Walter was such a nice
Showstoppers was his company.
Yeah, and he did great. And he was a showstopper, no question. So after I win, now Walter performed his ladder levitation in '79, but he didn't compete with it. He only performed it on the show. So after I won and I ran into Walter at the first convention, I went over to him and I said, Walter, I just want to thank you. I said, because had you competed in '79, you would have won and you'd have been the first American to ever win, hands down, right? I said, so I'm so lucky, thank you. So I always kidded Walter. And in fact, when you and I played golf together at Abbott's 2 years ago, and they did the unveiling of Walter's tomb,
headstone,
his daughter's headstone. Yes, excuse me. One of his daughters, who I hadn't met because I had known Becky, but the other daughter, I told her the story and she loved it. She knew her dad would got a kick out of it and everything.
You mentioned, we glossed over this, and that is Al's Magic Shop in Washington, D.C., and I meant to, in my introduction of you, of saying that you were one of the first demonstrators.
I was the first
demonstrator at Al's Magic Shop, which until recently was one of the oldest magic shops in the country. I think actually Eagle Magic Shop in Minnesota is the longest one.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But Al's is still around. Still.
No. Al, in fact, Al, I'm going to say Al passed away about...
And for those who are not familiar, by the way, this was in Washington, D.C. area.
Right, Washington, D.C. Al's Magic, there was a Harry Baker I mentioned earlier, had a Harry Baker magic shop. And then around, I'm going to say, the late 40s, Al started, his dad had a gift shop on Pennsylvania Avenue, just 2 blocks from the White House.
Yeah.
And so Al got into magic and started putting magic in the shop. And then Al became such a great demonstrator. I mean, from seeing him at conventions.
Sure.
He was the top demonstrator, in the world, I would say, in his heyday. But he
was Mark Mason of the day.
Yep, exactly. So anyway, he hired me as I was a teenager, my late teens, and I was his first demonstrator. So I say the success that I've had in magic, and I've been so blessed. I had Dick Gray as a great mentor. I then had Al Cohen from Al's Magic, who taught me how to make money. In those days, I was doing a birthday party for $25, and Al says, "Well, if you produce a rabbit and let all the kids pet the rabbit, you can get an extra $10." So, which would pay later on when I got into the corporate field. There were lots of extras that I provided the corporations that helped my fees.
Kind of changed your mindset a little bit there.
It changed my mindset big time, and then of course I met Bud Dietrich that allowed me to go from the birthday parties to
the big money,
where the real money was.
Exactly.
And so all three of those guys, I'm just so blessed, and all the other magicians. I realize I do a very simple, clean coin production that was taught to me by, I was about 13 years old in Ring 50. Larry Norris, he was a black magician from Washington, D.C. So this would have been probably 1964, 60, right around when the Civil Rights Act was passed in 64. Mm-hmm. But Larry was denied membership into Ring 50 twice because he was black.
Wow.
The third time he got it. In fact, I was telling Ice McDonald this story after Ice did such a nice presentation of
that was amazing.
Three famous black magicians.
Yeah.
But Larry changed my life. I mean, this is a trick. I did this trick. I'm set to do it in a bathing suit.
Okay.
I was in Naples. I go to Naples every year in
Naples,
January.
Florida. Mm-hmm.
Naples, Florida.
Not Italy.
And I'm in, yes, right. And I'm in a jacuzzi, and I've got a buddy that I'm visiting down there who likes to tell folks that I'm, successful magician, et cetera. Mm-hmm. We're in a jacuzzi with this other guy. This is in a very wealthy section of half a block from the Ritz-Carlton. Wealthy guy in there. He was telling the story, and the guy says, "Well, yeah, you're such a good magician. Can you do a trick?" Well, I do that in the thing. We felt we needed to get out of the hot tub because we were afraid he messed his pants. Because it was so not possible. Well, Larry Norris taught me that, and I mean, my goodness, I've literally done that trick for the President of the United States. I'll show you the effect. Let me see if. Well, shoot.
Because you really do it pretty much with nothing when you're in a hot tub. I mean, you're not wearing but your shorts.
I can't do it now because I'm not prepared. But can I borrow that from you right there?
What do you need?
Right here. Let me just this right here.
Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead.
You see what I'm talking about right there?
Yes. Okay.
That silver dollar.
Yeah.
You see, it's round. It's got a heads and a tails.
Right.
Just do me a favor and blow on that, would you?
Okay.
Don't feel so bad. I do this for a living. All right, Scott.
Okay.
As meager as it may be. All right, but by the way, it's kind of hard to do with short sleeves. And
yes, it is. I would imagine it. But in short pants.
But exactly.
And it becomes real.
So, I mean, this trick has been, because I'm one of these magicians. I'm not anxious to show everybody a trick. Number one, I do it for a living, so I do it all the time.
I understand that.
But I like people to sort of approach me, like my friend Ron, who will tell somebody that I'm a magician, or if I'm on a plane, somebody say, "So what do you do for a living?" I always ask them, by the way, "What do you think?" And normally I get doctor or lawyer, okay, because I have that kind of corporate sort of look and feel, which I wanted to have all those years. But when I tell a magician, of course, they're fascinated by it, and the conversation goes there. So then I might do this or something.
That's when you need to do something, because once that you open that door, the first thing they're going to say, I don't know any other profession that people expect you to perform your profession on demand.
Yeah. It depends on how somebody, when you use the word demand, that's an interesting, because especially in the corporate world, or country clubs, different things that you might be at, you'll get some people, and I had a lawyer one time, kind of sort of in a demanding way. Well, go ahead and show me. It was kind of rude the way he was doing it, like I was his servant or something.
Right.
So I said, well, I'll tell you what. First, I said, I want you to draw up a hold harmless agreement for a show that I'm going to do or something. Well, he was taken back by that, and I didn't mean to be rude back, but I just wanted to show him. And then I did do the trick, and he was fine. But he got the point that he had been a little bit too demanding, if you will. Mm-hmm. But, I learned also...
And trivializing our profession.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that I have... I've always tried to do is make our profession very first class. Mm-hmm. And I had met Teller just briefly some years back. I'm sure he didn't remember. And I just met him again here and just talked to him briefly. But I told him, I said, I have to thank, he says, every time I get the opportunity, I'd like to thank all you big time magicians. I said, because Doug Henning, of course, is the guy that really took the wave and took magic into that first-class area of entertainment that it was. But David Copperfield, Penn and Teller, Criss Angel, Blackstone, Siegfried Roy, all of the great, Lance Burton, all of the greats that are up there, they have risen. They've raised the tide up for all of us. And I tell them, frankly, I'm sure I've made probably 10 times the amount of money in my career for 53 years, because when I started as a school show magician, that was about what you could aspire to.
Yeah.
There was nobody, maybe Milburn Christopher occasionally would be on the Today Show, the Gary Moore Show, but until Mark Wilson with the Magic Land of Alakazam in 1960, Don Allen with the Magic Ranch, and the Magic Castle, all of those three things happening through the 60s, all pulling magic up. And then this wave is getting bigger, and then all of a sudden Doug Henning comes in, and it's like a tsunami. It just was amazing. So I have, I believe, because you and I are the same age, we have lived in the real golden era of magic, and it's continuing.
It is, and I'm glad to see young people who are getting involved in that then as well. And that's one of the things, too, I'm sure, like at Al's Magic Shop, that you had a lot of people who were coming in who were young people, and you're trying to show them the right things to direct them into learning magic. I talked with a dealer once who had said, I never show people on the first, second, or third time the invisible deck, because if they learn that, then they come back, wanting more, and there's no better trick.
You can't beat it, right?
No,
exactly.
Right.
That's a good point.
So that's not until much later that they come back and show their interest. Right. Before that I would give that to them. But it is something in which you have to feed the snake. You have to keep, finding new things. And that's like we're here at Magic Live right now, and we saw the huge dealer's room full of all kinds of new stuff, and it was packed day and night. I mean, from opening till close.
And it was great. It was amazing.
A lot of, because Stan always has them introduce new tricks, books, whatever it happens to be here at this convention. And there were several new things that were introduced here. But also, when you were working at Al's, I assume that there were a lot of political celebrities that came in. Because I talked with someone who had said, I remember when my friend George W. Bush liked magic, because he had worked with me doing some magic back in Midland years ago.
Oh, neat. Oh, I didn't know that. Then I need to talk to you about a book. Well, I'll tell you what it is. I'm almost finished with it. Well, let me back up a second. For 50 years, I've been writing a book on Houdini. And in the late 80s, early 90s, I was preparing to have it published in 1996, the 70th anniversary of Houdini's death. And that's when Ruth Brandon and Ken Silverman came out with theirs. In fact, I'll never forget, it was so funny. We were crisscrossing the country, all of us going to the different collections, and I go to Austin to the University of Texas, and Ken Silverman's, all of his Post-it notes were he had just been there, all of his Post-it notes were in the scrapbook saying, I want this, and a little note or whatever. So I sort of knew Ken was going well. Anyway, long story short, in 94, my former wife, Sandy, who had been my partner on stage too, decided she wanted a different life and left our marriage. And my youngest daughter, Amanda, was 16. She decided to stay with Dad. So I realized, things are going to be different now. And now I've got to really, focus more so on the business and taking care of Amanda. So I had to shelf the Houdini book. And so I've been still fooling with it through the years and collecting stuff. And I've got some really pretty original stuff on Houdini. I actually interviewed Joseph Smilowitz, Joe Smiley, who was the artist backstage when Houdini was supposedly punched in the stomach.
Yeah.
And I actually interviewed, this is all on tape, I interviewed Bill Rauscher, put me on to this lady, but she was a student nurse. She was Houdini's nurse.
At the hospital?
At the hospital at Harbor Grace. And then the other irony of it is I actually own the artifacts of the hospital room because I had gotten into a hobby like Milt Larsen did with the Magic Castle of collecting artifacts. I was going to build this big mansion in the mid-'80s in Annapolis, Maryland. But anyway, so I have the door frame and the window frames, the heating grate, and other little things from the hospital room. And the reason I found it is that George Johnstone's column in Topps magazine at the time was saying, oh, I hear that they're going to tear down Harbor Grace. And I had this experience of working with demolition companies because I had recreated, my first big thing that I ever did was in 1977. I recreated Houdini's straitjacket escape in Washington, D.C. at Keith's Theater, half a block from the White House, where you've seen the famous picture with the Washington Monument in the background. Well, I recreated it the same, and it was unbelievable because we never expected it. I was certainly an unknown name, but we promoted it. They had to block off the street. There were thousands of people filling 15th Street.
Wow.
So it was like when I'm going up to the roof to check on the block and tackle, I mean, I'm just in my late 20s. I don't know what I'm really doing, frankly, you know. And the reporter says to me, he says, so Mr. Allen, he says, what's it feel like walking in the shoes of Houdini? And I'm like, oh my God. And then I realized I sort of am, you know, and I'm experiencing it. So anyway, I got into this thing, and so I was able to, so I have them, which now are in a museum that I've opened next to my theater. But anyway, I digress into
So yeah, you're talking about Houdini, and as I was saying that George W. Bush liked magic, and in fact, going back, tying this to Houdini, I had a friend, Ron Cartledge, who wrote Houdini in Texas, and that was one of GW's favorite books that he would carry around the White House with him, actually.
Oh, so I definitely have to talk to you. The reason I say that, how I got into the Houdini thing is I've almost finished, I'm like 85% finished with a book, Magicians at the White House. And because every famous magician, Houdini, Blackstone, Thurston, Dunninger, you name it, all perform there, including Henning, Copperfield.
Oh, a lot of people have also done the inaugural ball.
And a lot of people have done the inaugural ball. So, and then there's a lot of people like myself that aren't that well known. You know, I promote myself now at this point in my career. I promote myself as the most famous magician you've never heard of. You know, but so this book, you know, so I've been fortunate to have performed 13 times there for different presidents. But it's a really neat, but George Bush is one of 4 presidents that were amateur magicians. And George H.W. Bush was probably the most avid. And this is a story I wasn't working at Al's, but Al told me the story, and Mike Hummer, who was working at the time, reiterated it. So George H.W. Bush is now vice president.
Yeah.
And he comes in to Al's shop, and he starts to buy stuff. Well, Al's a little bit taken by it, even though he's used to having celebrities come in there. But this is a vice president of the United States. And so Mike is doing most of the pitching to the president. And at one point, or the vice president, so at one point, he's showing him some trick that's $75. Now, this is the late 80s. So it's a lot of money. So
during the Reagan era.
The Reagan era, exactly. He's vice president for Ronald Reagan. So he says to Mike, the vice president says, well, he says, that's an awful lot of money. And Mike says, yes, it is a lot of money. He says, but you can look at it. It's a very well-made prop. He says, and also, he says, you are the vice president of the United States. He says, you're right, I'll take it. So he gets a bunch of stuff, and he gets like $450 worth of stuff. And at the end, he says, he goes to pay for it, and he says, you know, I don't have enough cash. He says, can I give you a check? And Al's wife, Alice, is standing right there, and Alice was a character. Alice says, she says, do you have any ID? You know, and he loved it. Yeah. But he bought Ronald Reagan, you know, the Mirage, the little optical illusion that has hyperbolic optical illusion that has looks like a flying saucer with a
yes, of course, yes.
He bought one of those for for Ronald Reagan. He loved the jokes.
You could put a jelly bean in the bottom of that or something.
Yes, exactly. And he bought when remote control whoopee cushions. He bought a bunch of them for the congressman. And then when he became president, he didn't go to the shop again, but he would send Secret Service agents down. Al would tell him good tricks that would be good. Al would teach him to the Secret Service agents.
That's interesting.
He'd go back to the White House, and sometimes the agent didn't get it right, or when he'd have to call Al. So this was going on. And then another story I'll tell you about him that was neat is that Time Magazine asked him at one point when he's president, he says, Mr. President, he said, how do you make very difficult decisions? He says, I'll send you something on that. So Bush goes, I talked to his chief of staff for my book, and she said he had a wonderful sense of humor. He was a wonderful guy, and she said he just loved magic. But anyway, what he sent to the Time Magazine guy, he had a whole thing said he gets a crystal ball, which he probably got from Al's, and had a Swami thing on it, and took a picture of him looking at the crystal ball. And that's what he did. He just sent the picture to the Time Magazine. So
well, he had a good sense of humor. One time when we were trying to get the Houdini stamp struck, and I say we, the S.A.M. and others,
right.
And they were using every means possible. They had Cary Grant at the time writing letters to the president, et cetera, et cetera. And I asked George if I could get a letter to his dad, and he said, "Sure, just give it to me, and I'll make sure they bypass everybody." And he did. And so it was just detailing all the things Houdini had done, et cetera, and why we should have a stamp of that. And I got a letter back from his dad and saying...
You're talking about George H.W. Bush.
H.W. Bush,
okay,
yes.
Gotcha.
That was... saying, well, thanks for your letter, and it sounds good, but I'm not the one actually who makes the decision. That's the Postmaster General's decision as to who's going to be on the stamps, and they've got people lined up, et cetera. However, if I was going to be recommending a stamp, it would look something like this. And he had a drawing of a square and then kind of squiggly lines around it. It looked like a stamp, and there was nothing in it, and he wrote underneath there, "He's vanished."
Oh, that's cute.
I mean, that's the kind of humor he had. I wish I would have kept that. I cannot find that letter anywhere.
Oh, jeez. Yes. Oh, God. Yeah. What a great story. Well, I'm in addition to what you've told me here during this great podcast, thanks again for having me.
Sure.
That I'm gonna call you later to get some more
Okay.
because he was the most active person, but I won't tell who the other three, but two of the other presidents were well, actually all three of them were quite famous presidents. In fact, one of them is, well, I'll just say they were all very famous.
Okay, leave it at that.
Yeah.
Hush, hush, wink, wink. So, okay, going back to trade shows for just a minute, talking about Bud Dietrich and Dick Ryan and Mike Rogers and
Eddie Tullock,
the King, exactly. That was the era when you were working and doing all. And that was back when they were doing big illusions, also, not just.
Yeah.
Well, of course, Dick Ryan and the other guys were not doing big things necessarily, I guess.
No, most of the guys.
Now that I think about it, none of them were doing big illusions, were they?
Well, Mark Wilson was.
Mark was, but I don't think of him as a trade show magician.
Well, but
I think of him as a TV magician.
He was, but I'll tell you, in the late 60s, Mark is another guy that I have to... Well, of course, I was a young teenager when Magic Land and Malakazam came on. So when it came on every Saturday, Mark Wilson was my hero. So he really helped me, get into magic. I was later fortunate to meet him at one of his theme parks, which is a funny story. But anyway, we became, I thought, good friends. And I was at his place one time, and he told me, he said, he says, I'm pretty well known. And of course, he was very well known, television specials and everything else. But he wasn't a huge name. He wasn't like a Cary Grant or even a David Copperfield, if you will. So he said, corporate clients won't buy my name, he said, but they'll buy hardware because they're used to it. So prior to that, I kind of learned that because what I did, I was a little bit different than most of the trade show guys because I realized to compete in this business, in the magic business or whatever it was, it's like when I took over Dick Ray's school shows, he was an established, really good magician. I really wasn't as good by any means. I'm a 21-year-old, younger magician. So what I decided to do was the theme show. So one year it was the Magic Middle Ages, and I started out with a wizard costume and a silent magic, and then did a costume change, and then did all things around the Middle Ages. And one year was a circus theme. So I used these themes, which was great for me because it gave me practice to do custom magic when I got into the corporate field.
Sure.
So one of the things that I realized early was my presentation, I did a couple things different than the other guys. Your first thing when you've got to build a tip, if you will, a crowd, is always going to be a close-up thing. So you got to get that first, half a dozen, 10, 20 people to watch.
Right, and stop.
The second thing is to do a parlor stop, something up here at eye level, because you got a bigger crowd. And then thirdly, you want to do a big illusion because that's going to draw a big crowd.
True.
So the audience, the companies were used to paying, big money. So I would, frankly, whatever it cost the illusion, and I used to have, I still have probably 3 or 4 of them. I have 100 major stage illusions through the years that my clients have built or paid for. But I would charge whatever the illusion, I would charge double that for them to lease it for one show. And then if they used it later in the year for another show, 10% off. And then if they used it a second time, whatever. So I sort of bragged that, I helped pay one semester's, college tuition for one of my daughters from rental from this particular illusion, whatever, So that was the one thing that I did differently. Plus, I tried to work, instead of just saying the magic word,
whatever their
Ace
company name
Hardware,
is.
whatever.
Yeah.
I tried to really customize things, For F.I.S. Laboratories, George Kimmery built most all of my equipment. But I have stuff from Johnny Gone, from Owens, from, David Mendoza built a couple things for me. So, but anyway, back to F.I.S. There, we were promoting at the pediatric conventions, Infamil. So Infamil comes in a tall cylinder, just the size of a crystal silk cylinder. So I had George make a custom, beautiful, thing.
Yeah.
So all of my shows were very customized, which allowed me also to charge a bit more. So, and the third thing, and anybody out there doing trade shows, because I, am retired from doing those at least. The other thing that I innovated is that I had my companies build my performing platform. The table was slanted about maybe 20 to 25% facing the audience so that they could see the top, which I don't know why they don't do it at magic conventions and everything else, because the only thing that you can't do easily, and you can rectify this because I do it with some of my shows. If I'm going to do a trick with a ball or something, you just have a little railing around it with a little thread, really, so that it's visual. But if you do it just the right angle, cards will not slide, coins will not slide, and it makes a world of difference. So that was my other thing that I did a bit uniquely, in addition to the way I price things, so that I did well financially.
A little bit different.
All right.
I remember Walter Blaney also doing stage illusions, but obviously the other guys, again, like Bud Dietrich and others, were doing like linking rings, or Dick Ryan doing some card tricks.
Right, but Walter,
Eddie Tullock.
you're right. I'll tell you this, Eddie only did maybe a dozen slates, but Eddie was the best. Eddie and I became good friends, and Eddie didn't like everybody, and Eddie, you couldn't compete against Eddie. If you were across the aisle from Eddie, if he didn't like you, you would never. He'd
bury you.
He would bury you, and a wonderful guy. Don't get me wrong, and it was rare that he did that. I remember one show I was across the way, and he was kind enough, if you will, because he would also. I did a lot of research on how effective to make your show, how long to make it, all kinds of different things, utilizing surveys of trade show exhibits from Exhibit Surveys, who Dick Swanby was in fact, Dick's still a dear friend. Dick was an amateur magician, and I didn't know it at the time, but we became dear friends. And in fact, Dick helped me a lot in the trade show field. But also he allowed me to read these surveys. So I learned a lot of stuff of how to make the show most effective. So most shows shouldn't last really longer than 13 minutes, but I would make mine 17 to 18, pushing the thing. Eddie Tullock would go for a half an hour. And then take maybe a 5-minute break and then come back. He was a killer. But Eddie, one time I was across the way, and he was nice enough to let me. But I've heard the story that Jay Marshall took Di Vernon to see Eddie Tullock at a trade show.
Okay.
And Jay said something along the lines of, "I want to show you a real magician." And Eddie was, I assume, a multimillionaire. Did very, very well. And but anyway, Vernon did not say a very nice thing about Tullock's performance. But of course, I'm sorry, Di Vernon. Eddie Tullock was a huge success in the
public eye. Mm-hmm.
In the public eye. But he did basic stuff, but he did it great. And his presentation was great. I mean, he was just funny. I do Eddie's top change to this day, and it's great. So he was, God bless him. Eddie was a really good guy.
Yeah. That was a different time, and of course, trade shows have changed so much in today because the way that businesses can interact with customers a lot more directly through their websites and everything.
Zoom and all those things.
Of course.
And what really was the knife in the heart of the convention industry was 9/11, because that killed it. I would say that the trade show industry started because it closed down for 3, 4, 5, 6 months.
Yeah, you couldn't go anywhere.
And it never really picked up the same. The other thing that was in the 90s, you had the .com, which I made a lot of money through all of these big
tech companies.
These big companies that were just a brand new company
startups.
These startup companies, and investors were throwing tech money at them right and left. And they would come and you could write your own ticket, if you will, because they just had so much money. So that stopped, and then the dot-coms slowed down, and then 9/11, and then I would say from my perspective, I sort of, partly out of age too, I became sort of semi-retired about 2010, and then I found this theater. What was I thinking? But anyway... But I was, but the business had also, gone way down. The opportunities were not there anymore. But also, it was hard work. I mean, I will tell you, you're doing 10 to 12 shows a day, because you've done trade shows.
And on your feet, the whole time.
On your feet. It is hard. And if you do like Comdex used to be the big computer show here in Vegas every year, that was a 5-day show. After you did Comdex, I was doing Comdex as a young man. You're worn out.
I've seen some magicians who will have a little clock saying back in 15 minutes. I've never done that. I mean, it's kind of an ongoing thing. I mean, because you strike while the iron is hot, because they're between sessions. And if you are going to be back in 15 minutes, that could be when they're at the session, and you won't have anybody standing to try to draw to your booth.
Right.
So it's just kind of, I think you got to stop, obviously, at some point and have a set. But you could start a set almost immediately within 5 minutes after that, I think. So for me, I always thought that was kind of a weird thing to try. And I know many guys do that, but it just wasn't my style.
Well, I actually did do that.
Did you? Okay.
And I'll tell you
maybe
why.
It's a different era. I don't know.
Well, no, it was the same era probably. But again, see, what I tried to do is I tried to sell them a bigger production. Okay. So I also, I guess I forgot about this. Another thing that I did was try to get my clients to have seats. So my audience wasn't just standing.
Sure.
So having the sign saying you're going to have a show at 11 o'clock and that the seats are there, plus the other innovation I had is that I had a modeling agency that was part of our company, Corporate Productions. So we provided hostesses for the trade show. So these hostesses would be out in the aisle and say, "Have you seen our presentation?"
Oh, that's nice.
So to try to build the crowd.
Sure.
So, of course, I'm also making money from having the hostesses. So all of this was designed to make it a bigger and better, type of production. Now, sometimes I would have a client, smaller companies. These are most of the big Fortune 500 companies. Sometimes I'd have a company that, I'd worked as small as a 20 by 10, booth, but they didn't have the budget for that. But that would be the ideal situation. So I'd like to do that. And I'll tell you the other reason.
Well, if you're doing some big illusions, you've got to reset and everything.
You got to reset.
I'm doing card tricks.
Right, yes. So you got to do that. But I'll tell you the other reason I did it was that in those days, between shows, I would maybe only have 5 to 7, 8 minutes because I typically would do a show about every half an hour. So I didn't have much time.
Right.
But I also would have assistants so they could reset the illusion. And what I would do is I would go and I would literally go around the exhibits and I would look at exhibits that looked like they could use a live presentation. And I'd pitch my wares, get their card and give their wares. So I got a lot of business from doing that, at shows. And I will tell you this, too. Sometimes I would go into a booth inadvertently, and I didn't realize they had another magician.
Oh.
And whenever they did, I said, excuse me, let's say it was a Paul Gertner. Paul and I were good friends. And I'd say, oh, well, Paul does a great job. I said, if he's never available, something, give me a call or whatever. But I would never, ever pitch another client.
Yeah.
And which is kind of a funny thing back to our camaraderie. In any other business trade, it's like nobody would consider that. We as magicians, I think, do have respect and honor in that regard.
Right.
So, but anyway, I picked up, one of our biggest clients I picked up was IBM in doing that between shows.
Well, you mentioned to me earlier, and I want you to retell the story about how that during the tech era you had like this head spinner. I think it was a computer screen or something.
No, what it was that I was not good at. To this day, I can't memorize scripts. So many of my clients were these high tech companies that you would have the IBM 4XC3, and it's got so many megabytes and whatever, all of these very complicated stuff. So I had a wonderful woman, still a dear friend. We haven't worked together for 10 years or so, but Bobby Candler, who's an actress in LA, still there. In fact, we just texted last week. But anyway, Bobby was former Miss Louisiana and very funny, bright, beautiful woman. She would often play the foil by being an audience member. And initially the folks wouldn't realize that she was part of the show, but basically I'd say, to really discover the inner workings of a computer, you almost have to go inside. So today we're going to do that. In fact, Miss, would you mind helping me? And what is your name? Bobby. Bobby, thank you. Would you sit right here, please? And I have this computer, so I had George Kimry take a computer monitor, and he turned it into a head chest where the head would vanish with one sword going down the middle. So Bobby would get it, and the screen was a gray metal screen. I still have it. In fact, Tim White here in Vegas built the case for it, the anvil case. But anyway, so she'd get in there, and Bobby was great at remembering scripts. So I would kind of hypnotize her, and she's in this cabinet, and she would say all the technical stuff, and I didn't have to worry about it. So she would always give me a hard time that I gave the hard parts. And then I would say it, and what I would do is her head would disappear, and then we did some interactive stuff with a big screen and all this and that.
Yeah.
And then it would come back, and then people would realize over the 3 or 4 days of the show that she was within it, but also it was a good show, so that would help bring people in,
Sure.
So then they got into it, and they enjoyed being in on the, the thing. But so how I was fortunate to have lots of customized things that really designed and worked well, for the clients, whatever they might be.
As I start to kind of bring this home, I want to talk now about the theater. So you said in 2010 is when you decided to make a bad decision and open a theater. I know you're joking about that. But.
Yeah, no, what happened, I was two things. So the trade show industry sort of dies down in 10. Around that same time, the tobacco industry did their tobacco settlement. And there were billions of dollars given to, and most magicians don't even know I did this. But my dad had died from smoking-related cancer when he was 49. So and my mom would later die from smoking-related cancer. And so I despise tobacco. I think it's just a death merchant. And I encourage everybody to stop or to cut back. So when I saw this, my trade show business is going down the hill. I'm looking for a new area to make income. I see this article. I was visiting my mom in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and she's sitting there smoking away, and I'm reading this article. So I come back to Washington, and because my expertise was selling a product or service with magic and illusion, I contacted the American Cancer Society, and I said, look, I'd like to put together a show to encourage young people not to smoke, that we could take in schools and boys and girls clubs and everything else. And so we did, and it was called Make Smoking Disappear. So the first 5 or 10 years of that, I was kind of semi-retired, didn't have to travel much. I was playing more tennis and golf, do my 3 or 4 or 5 shows a week. The state of Maryland and Virginia health departments were paying me, very nice fees for these shows. And I was very happy with it. But then, as sometimes happens in politics, they got greedy. And now if you go, almost every state in the union are still getting billions of dollars, but they're only using maybe 5 to 10% for tobacco prevention. So that money sort of dried up. So now I'm almost really semi-retired, and I say, I was out promoting my show for theaters because I do a one-man show for theaters. Well, not actually one-man, a smaller illusion show. But anyway, I was promoting, and I had this list from Cinema Treasures, which is a database online, and it shows this theater in Danville, Virginia, 5 hours from my home in Annapolis, town I'd never heard of, that they'd spent $3.5 million restoring this beautiful 1945 theater that has a full balcony, 500 seats, beautifully, and they describe how they did this new elevator, electronic computerized fly-loft system, all this stuff. And I'm like, and it was closed after 5 years, closed for almost 2 years, and it was for sale. And I'm sitting to myself,
wow. Now,
I had run a theater in the mid-'80s. I had a show called Bedazzled that Don Wayne, Bev Bergeron, and Paul Osborne all worked on. It was a big show in a theater I didn't own. The guy that made all the money was the landlord. So because I'd been doing so much in the corporate field, my kids were young, we decided we wanted to stay home. And I did, but I didn't make as much money. So I went back to the corporate field, which, by the way, Doug Henning saved my butt because, am I allowed to say that word?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah. But when I'm closing my theater and deciding to go back to corporate, I had let my corporate business go for 2 years. Doug and I had been good friends. We met at Abbott's Get Together in '69, right after we both graduated from high school. We happened to hang around in the same group, and we stayed friends. And when he had the magic show, he invited me up. And anyway, we stayed in touch. So that summer that I'm closing my theater, summer of '87, I think the story is that Doug called his office and said, I'm retiring. He wanted to get involved more with the transcendental meditation.
Right.
I'm retiring, sell all the magic. So that's when they had the big auction.
Right.
Then the next month he calls and he says, all right, everybody's fired. He said, but you're all getting very good severance packages, which they did. Well, he also turned over his corporate magic to me. So it saved. I did a huge national sales meeting for Harley Davidson, and it financially really saved me because here I'm coming down to this, closing the theater. I'd lost, probably 80% of my corporate business because you can't do two things at once.
That's right.
So anyway, back to 2012, I'm calling. I say, you know what? Should I even do this? I'm 60 years old. What am I thinking, right? But I bought this theater, and I paid under $1 million, but I bought this beautiful, beautiful theater. It's got a bed and breakfast, a restaurant in it.
Wow.
And so I bought it strictly as a satellite business, and I never, ever expected to move there because I lived in Annapolis, Maryland, beautiful little resort town, and I had a nice home, lived there for 31 years in a nice waterfront community. I mean, I just figured that would be where I would end up. Anyway, I bought it. I operated it as a long-term because you can do all the marketing, Facebook and all the advertising and everything else. I would drive, but I drove over 4 years, that 5-hour trip over 100 times. And in that period of time, I also realized if I really want to bring the theater back alive, I need to be there. I need to be a member of the Chamber of Commerce. So it was a hard decision to leave and move there, but I did. And the other thing is, too, why I really kind of did this was that I like to think of myself as a jock, but athletic. You and I, played golf a couple years ago at Abbott's, although I'm not a very good golfer, but I love it, right? Sure. But I am a pretty good tennis player, and I play tennis normally if I'm in town every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So I realize, I've kind of, I've sort of, in the magic field, I've had a wonderful career. Magic has been so great to me. I've got so many friends. I've made a good living. I'm blessed. But I've always been under the radar. And frankly, through the years, I never really wanted anybody to know that I was trade shows. So I never contacted Francis Marshall and said, would you put it in your article?
Success book.
Or the success book, or in her article in Lincoln Ring.
Around Chicago.
That I'm coming to Chicago, McCormick Place, because I didn't want, people to know. This is the first time I've ever publicly told magicians that I even did the Make Smoking Disappear show, because I didn't want any competition. I was always, that way. Magicians ask me what I did for F.I.S.M, and I tell them it was a zigzag on steroids. Because I don't want to describe it. Fortunately, no one's ever ripped me off and never recreated. So I've always been a little, I hate to use the word paranoid, but I've been maybe extra secretive. So anyway, I decided to move there because with this sort of athletic thing, I said, you're 60 years old, you're semi-retired, and instead of just sort of going out, why not go out with a bang? I would say it's probably every magician's dream to have his own theater.
Sure. And
I have it. So.
And you have other magicians who come in from time to time and perform there, or?
Well, I've had.
Or is it just community playhouse kind of?
I've had lots of famous magicians and not so famous magician friends that have. Criss Angel has actually said he would come, and I saw Criss here and didn't. He was busy with everybody, but. I would love to sort of pin Criss. He's sent for years, and I think he will. I mean, of course, to play a small venue like me for 500 with a show like Criss's, he'd be doing me a huge favor, and I'd love it. But I would, the big names like that would be great. Lance Burton would like to come. And and the big guys like that would be great for the theater.
Sure.
Because it would help the theater. But lots of my other magician friends that aren't that well, that might not be strong enough to bring in an audience, I tell them frankly, and I say, and this is true also, I perform about 10 times a year for public shows, and I do a fair number of bus tours. I bring in fact, next week I'll be at the North Carolina Virginia Motor Coach Association because in my gallery mini theater that holds 70, I can do a smaller show, bring a bus in, they come in, see the city. I have a whole plan that they go through.
That's a good idea.
So I do that, and nobody really even knows I'm doing it, But back to the other magicians, I'll tell them, I'll say, look, I said, I don't want my theater to be just a magic theater because we have concerts and plays and all kinds of stuff. We had the Danville Symphony Orchestra for 3 shows last year. So I don't want it to be just magic. And I said, and the second reason, I said, honestly, I don't want you guys making me look bad.
When you want to do your show.
And so I say it. I say it kiddingly, but I'm also serious because there's so many, frankly, there's so many magicians that I feel are probably much better than me. But I've been fortunate to have the success I have, and I'm blessed.
You have over a good life.
I've had just
a lot of friends and a lot of experiences,
and I couldn't. I have no regrets in my life, except that maybe my marriage, didn't stay together, so our family could stay together.
Yep, never know.
Yeah.
Well, as I close, my podcast is called The Magic Word, and so what is it that's it's important to you? What's your philosophy, or do you have a word or phrase?
A word or phrase. I guess my word or phrase would probably be "go for it."
Go for it.
Yeah, because I've just like I had never entered into a contest for magicians, MAS. People asked me to do it when I was a teenager and younger, and I had the foolishness or the guts or stupidity, whatever, to go for F.I.S.M early, and so I always have thought big and tried to go big, and I've had success. But I would say the fact that I'm willing to go for it and sort of roll the dice, that I've been fortunate, even if I didn't hit it big.
Like you were saying, that you shoot for the moon, but land in the stars.
You got it. Yeah, really.
So you have to go for it, or you never have that opportunity.
Yeah, just recently at the SAM convention, one reason I went to Nashville was to see. I'd met Stephen Bargatze some years back, and he doesn't remember, but so I went down there and I told Stephen when I saw him, I said, Stephen, one of the reasons I'm here is that I said that I hope to be your best friend in the next 3 days so that I can get your son Nate to come to my theater. And he laughed, but guess what? Nate ended up showing up. I actually mentioned it, gave Nate, thing. You never know.
Never know.
So, and I asked Stephen here at this convention if he could check us out. I'm going to have a Houdini festival next year in March at my theater, and I'd love Stephen to do his straitjacket escape. So
he's got a funny one. It's good.
Wonderful.
So tell me about the two things. Where can people go if they want to get tickets or get more information about the theater? They go to what website?
They can go to thehistoricnorththeater.com, or you can just look up if you look up Wayne Allen Magic, you'll find stuff about me. Although right now when I get home from this, I've got to update the website. I'll tell you that right up front. But anyway. And you'll find out about the theater too, and it's the Historic North Theater.
And the Houdini Festival. Did you say it's going to be March
Festival,
what?
There is information on the website about that too.
It's March what?
It's going to be March. Here, let me see. I've got the little flyer right here. It is March 26th, 27th, and 28th, and the balcony. It's a cool thing we do. Is the balcony? Because I'm going to have the first 4 seats taken out of the balcony, so you have a nice little platform, and then a curtain and a backdrop, so that a solid backdrop, so the performers won't fall over the balcony. But because it's 113 seats, very nicely raked, it's beautiful to see close up. So it's like the Magic Castle.
Is this something that's going to be for the public or for the magicians?
It's going to be for both. I'm hoping to bring together magicians, escape artists, and historians to celebrate Houdini. So it's going to be very fun, but the evening shows will be open to the public. There will be a couple lectures that will be open to the public. We'll be showing some of Houdini's silent films.
Great.
And so it should be really fun.
I was just telling someone earlier about how next year the John Cox, who runs Wild About Harry website, or actually wildabouthoudini.com, the daily blog, is going to be very busy next year. I think he's going to be in demand.
Yeah, there's no question. I just bought John's book, The Diary. That's the one thing I bought at the convention. And
that's a new release too.
His blog and his website is just great.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you very much, and I like that magic word. Then just do it, or not? Yeah, that was Nike. Just go for it. Sorry,
yeah.
Just go for it. Wayne, thanks very much. Appreciate your time, your friendship.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Scott. I'm honored.
You're welcome. You're
really
welcome.
Super.
So, for the Magic Word Podcast, that was Wayne Allen. This is Scotty out.
Well, thank you, my friend. That was nice.
Thank you, Wayne, for being my guest today, and also for sharing your thoughts and your advice and wisdom, and certainly your stories and experience. I think you have a lot of experience that people can look up to and gain from just hearing what you have done, and perhaps aspire to do at least perhaps even half of those things. So congratulations, and I hope that your theater continues to grow and you do very well. Well, I am going to try to close this out quickly because we've been on a little bit longer than typical, and I would like to remind everybody again to go to themagicwordpodcast.com, where you can enter the contest for a chance to win a copy of the Houdini Legacy cards, win a deck of those in red. He hasn't developed the blue ones yet, as you heard earlier, but those are going to be awarded one deck each week throughout the month of October, so we have several weeks of winners that will be announced from week to week. So go there and don't be late, and please enter the contest. We had a lot of people, I think, who wanted to enter this last contest but never got to it, and before long, well, you snooze, you lose. So don't want to do that for this. So hurry up and go and enter. And once you have entered, you don't need to continue to enter week after week, because I will leave your name on the spreadsheet. So this way it will continue to grow. And as more people are added onto it, the pot will still be drawn from everybody in there. So in other words, those who entered first will have an equal chance as those who entered last, because it's a random selection. Also, you can have an opportunity to join the pod letter, so you keep up with what's going to be going on and who's going to be here from week to week, plus suggestions from the archives. You want to be sure to keep up with that on the Magic Word Podcast pod letter. So until next week, stay well, get booked, and remember to just go for it. This is Scotty out.